I've always thought kitchens feel different at night, quieter, almost secretive, as if they hold the weight of conversations no one dared to have in daylight. That thought kept circling in my head the first evening I found myself alone in Daniel's kitchen, waiting for him to come downstairs. But the footsteps I heard weren't his. Daniel and I had been friends since high school. He was the kind of person who filled silence with easy laughter, who could turn the most mundane errands into a story worth retelling. I envied that about him, how effortlessly he belonged wherever he went, while I lingered at the edges, watching, wanting, and never quite saying what I felt. That summer things felt different. Maybe it was because we were both home from college, stuck in that awkward limbo between who we used to be and who we were supposed to become. Maybe it was because I spent more nights at his place than my own, pulled in by the comfort of his family, the hum of their household, the warmth I pretended not to crave. And maybe, though I wouldn't admit it even to myself at the time, it was because of his dad. Mr. Hale. James, though I never dared to call him that aloud. He carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that made people lower their voices without realizing it. He wasn't loud, not like Daniel, but there was something in the way he looked at people, steady, patient, that made you feel seen. Too seen sometimes. I told myself my glances were just curiosity. That the flutter in my chest when his hand brushed mine while passing a plate was nothing. That the way I noticed his cologne, woodsy and clean, lingering long after he left the room, was normal. Harmless. But the kitchen light clicked off that night and I realized how flimsy my excuses were. The room went dark except for the glow from the stove clock. My heart leapt into my throat before I heard his voice, low, almost amused, cutting through the shadows. You'll ruin your eyes sitting here in the dark. I swallowed the words I wanted to say, any words at all, catching before they reached my tongue. Because I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was afraid of what I felt in it. Daniel had a way of making me forget myself. That was probably why we'd stayed friends for so long, because being around him meant I didn't have to carry the weight of silence, of awkward pauses, of not knowing how to fit into the world. He was the glue in every group he touched and I was just lucky enough to stick. We met in sophomore year of high school, thrown together for a history project neither of us cared about. I still remember how he'd insisted on meeting at his place instead of the library, claiming he worked better, with snacks and his dad's old records spinning in the background. At the time I thought it was just an excuse to avoid doing real work. But the truth was I'd never felt so at ease anywhere else. His house smelled faintly of cinnamon and cedar, and his mom always had a plate of cookies cooling on the counter. His dad would peek in sometimes, nod politely, ask about the project. I didn't think much of it back then. Now, years later, that ease had turned into something like belonging. And belonging is a dangerous thing when it starts to feel like home. Don't tell me you ate the last of the chips, Daniel groaned, stumbling into the kitchen one evening, his hair a mess from the summer heat. He caught me mid-crunch, hands still in the bag. You snooze, you lose, I said through a mouthful, grinning when he threw a dish towel at me. That was the emergency stash. You owe me. Pretty sure you still owe me from, like, 3 years ago when you ate all my Halloween candy. Correction, you abandoned your candy in my room. Finders keepers. This was how it always went with us. Jabs softened by laughter, arguments that never really held any weight. And yet, beneath the banter, I felt something else. A current tugging at me when our eyes met too long, when his shoulder brushed mine as he leaned across the counter. He never noticed the way I drew in a little breath at those moments. Or if he did, he never said. That summer, Daniel invited me to join him on a weekend camping trip. Just the two of us. It wasn't unusual, we'd gone on plenty of road trips and late-night adventures. But when he tossed the second sleeping bag into the trunk, I realized something was off. Wait, I said, frowning at the worn nylon roll. That thing still has a busted zipper. Yeah, but it's fine, he shrugged, throwing himself into the driver's seat. Worst case, we'll share mine. He said it casually, without hesitation, like it was nothing. But my pulse skipped all the same. Sharing a sleeping bag wasn't the kind of thing I could just brush off. Not with him. Not with the way my chest tightened at the thought. The trip itself was typical Daniel chaos. He got us lost twice, nearly burned the hot dogs, and made me laugh so hard with some dumb story about his coworkers that I spilled soda down my shirt. But when the rain came that night, sudden and heavy against the thin walls of the tent, I couldn't ignore the complication anymore. The zipper on my sleeping bag jammed completely. I tugged at it, cursed under my breath, but it was no use. Daniel looked over, flashlight beam catching the frustration on my face. Told you. Should have trusted me. I rolled my eyes. And what's your solution, oh wise one? He grinned, patting the narrow space beside him. Told you already. Sharing's caring. It was a joke, light-hearted, But there was something unspoken in the air when I slid in next to him, our shoulders pressed together, warmth bleeding through the thin fabric. The rain drowned out everything else but not the sound of his breathing, steady and close. I lay awake longer than I should have, pretending not to notice the way his arm brushed mine whenever he shifted. Pretending I wasn't wide awake, caught between fear and something dangerously close to hope. The rain didn't stop. It pounded the tent in relentless sheets, each drop a steady reminder that we were stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but thin nylon between us and the storm. The ground beneath us softened, damp seeping in despite the tarp Daniel had so confidently claimed would hold up fine. Typical Daniel. Always optimistic, always improvising, always dragging me along into situations I should have known better than to agree to. But this time the complication was more than just a leaky tent. It was him. It was the way the air inside the small space felt charged like static after lightning. "Guess we're not hiking tomorrow," Daniel muttered, adjusting his pillow and shifting closer to me. Too close. His arm brushed mine skin against skin, and it was like every nerve in my body woke up at once. "Not unless you want pneumonia," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. He laughed softly, the sound low and warm in the dark. "At least we've got snacks. And each other. That's survival, right?" I turned my head to look at him, though I could barely make out his features in the dim light. His grin was there, though, the kind that crinkled his eyes and dared me to match it. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But instead, I just smiled faintly and looked away because if I looked too long, I wasn't sure what he'd see in my face. The rain pressed on, a steady percussion above us. His breathing settled into an easy rhythm, but mine refused to calm. Every shift he made seemed deliberate, even though I knew it wasn't. His knee brushing mine under the sleeping bag, the way his shoulder pressed into me when he turned. "Hey," he said suddenly, voice softer now. "Remember that time sophomore year when the power went out during finals week and you freaked out because you couldn't study?" I groaned. "Why do you remember that?" "Because you lit like 10 candles in my room and tried to recite history dates to me until my dad made us stop before we set the house on fire." He chuckled at the memory, nudging me gently. "You've always been wound too tight. And you've always been a pain," I shot back, though my lips betrayed me with a smile. That was Daniel, able to take the edge off my sharpest moods with a single well-placed jab. And that was me, wanting more from him than I could ever say out loud. The storm raged on, and the tent seemed to shrink around us. I tried to focus on the rhythm of the rain, on anything but how close he was. But then his arm shifted again, this time resting lightly against mine. Not accidental. Not entirely. My chest tightened. Did he know what that did to me? Did he feel it too? Or was this just another moment, casual and forgettable for him, earth-shattering for me? "You're quiet," he said after a while, his voice edged with curiosity. "Just thinking," I murmured. "Dangerous habit." He smiled, but there was something else there, something unspoken. His gaze lingered even in the dim light, and I felt it like a weight pressing into me. I wanted to tell him everything. That I'd been holding on to this for years. That sometimes his laugh felt like sunlight on my skin, too bright, too much, but I still craved it. That sharing a sleeping bag with him felt like torture and heaven in equal measure. But the words lodged in my throat. Because if I said them, everything could change. And maybe I wasn't ready for that. He shifted again, rolling onto his side so he faced me fully. The move brought us chest to chest, breaths mingling in the small space. My heart stuttered painfully. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely above the sound of the rain. I nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah. Fine." He studied me for a moment longer, his eyes flicking over my face like he was searching for something. Then, without warning, he reached up and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. Just a casual gesture, something he might do to anyone. But the heat of his fingertips lingered, searing. I froze, caught between leaning into his touch and pulling away before he noticed the way it unraveled me. He didn't seem to notice, though, or maybe he did and he just didn't say. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until he finally yawned and rolled onto his back again. "Try to sleep," he murmured. "We've got a long hike back once this clears." I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Sleep. As if I could. Instead, I lay there in the dark, the storm outside echoing the storm inside me. Each shift of his body, each brush of his arm, was a reminder of everything I wanted but couldn't ask for. I told myself I should be grateful for this closeness, for this night. That maybe it was enough just to be here beside him. But deep down I knew it wasn't. Because hope is a stubborn thing. And no matter how much I tried to bury it, it was there, in the steady rhythm of his breathing, in the warmth of his body against mine, in the quiet possibility that maybe, just maybe, he felt it too. The storm didn't let up until morning. By the time the rain eased into a soft drizzle, the air inside the tent was heavy, humid, thick with breath and silence. Daniel was still asleep beside me, one arm flung lazily over his chest, his lips parted just slightly. I couldn't stop looking. It was dangerous, the way I let my eyes linger on him when he wasn't awake to notice. The curve of his jaw, the faint crease in his brow, the way his hair stuck up from where it had pressed against the pillow. If I stared too long, I knew I'd start to imagine things that weren't mine to imagine, like how it might feel to trace the jawline with my fingertips, or what it would be like to press my mouth against his until neither of us remembered where we ended and the other began. I turned away quickly, pressing the heel of my hand into my eyes. Get a grip. He was my best friend. Nothing more. Nothing he'd ever asked for. But when he stirred, rolling onto his side so that his shoulder brushed mine again, I knew I was lying to myself. This wasn't nothing. It never had been. Morning, he mumbled, his voice rough with sleep. Morning, I whispered back, my throat tight. He yawned and stretched, nearly knocking into me in the cramped space. Guess the storm's finally over. Yeah. My voice cracked on the single word, betraying me. He noticed. His eyes flicked toward me, sharper now, more awake. You okay? Fine, I said too quickly, forcing a weak smile. But Daniel didn't look convinced. He sat up slightly, bracing himself on one arm, peering down at me like he was trying to read a language he almost understood. You been weird? Since last night. I haven't, I lied. Yeah, you have. His tone was gentle, but it cut through me all the same. Talk to me. What's going on? I swallowed hard. My pulse pounded in my ears. This was it, the cliff I'd been standing on for years, the one I always backed away from at the last second. If I spoke now, if I told him the truth, there would be no taking it back. I opened my mouth, closed it again. Tried to steady my breathing. He waited. That was the thing about Daniel, he never pushed, not really. He just stayed. And sometimes that was worse because his patience made me want to hand him everything I'd been hiding. Finally, I let the words slip out, low and halting. It's hard being this close to you. His brows furrowed. What do you mean? I mean, my throat went dry, but I forced myself on. Sharing a tent, a sleeping bag, all of it, it's not easy for me. Not the way it should be. There was a beat of silence. His eyes searched mine, and for a moment I thought I'd made a mistake. A colossal mistake. But then he tilted his head slightly, his voice softer now. Why isn't it easy? I laughed, bitter and nervous, pressing my palms against my knees. Because Daniel, I don't know how to say this. Try, he said gently. My chest felt like it might cave in. But the truth clawed its way out anyway. Because I like you. More than I should. More than you probably want me to. The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy all at once. I couldn't look at him. If I did, I was sure I'd shatter. The silence stretched, unbearable. My heart hammered, waiting for the inevitable recoil, for him to laugh it off or worse, pity me. I wanted to take it back, to rewind time and keep the secret buried where it belonged. But then, softly, he said, You think I don't want you to? My head snapped up, eyes wide. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't read, open, uncertain, but not angry. Not disgusted. What? I breathed. He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking almost shy. I thought about saying something before. But I didn't want to mess things up. Didn't want to risk it if you didn't feel the same. The world tilted. My chest ached with something between relief and disbelief. You what? He gave a nervous laugh. You're not the only one who's been lying awake in this stupid tent all night. For a moment, all I could do was stare at him, my brain struggling to catch up with the reality of his words. Then, without meaning to, I let out a shaky laugh. You're serious. As a heart attack. His grin softened, almost tender now. Guess we're both idiots. I exhaled, the tension in my chest breaking loose all at once. My hands trembled where they rested on the sleeping bag. He noticed, of course he noticed, and without hesitation he reached out, covering my hand with his. The touch was simple, nothing dramatic. Just his palm against mine, warm and steady. But it unraveled me completely. Daniel, I whispered, barely able to form his name. He squeezed my hand gently. Hey, it's okay. We don't have to rush anything. But I couldn't stop myself. I've wanted this for so long. His eyes softened, something vulnerable flickering there. Me too. The air between us thickened, charged with everything we'd both left unsaid for years. Slowly, hesitantly, he leaned in. I felt his breath ghost against my lips, and my heart stuttered painfully. Can I? he asked, his voice almost trembling. I nodded, too choked with emotion to speak. The kiss was tentative, barely a brush at first. His lips against mine, soft and unsure. But when I didn't pull away, when I leaned into him instead, it deepened, slow and careful, like we were both afraid we'd break if we pushed too hard. When we finally pulled back, I was breathless, my forehead resting against his. I can't believe we actually said it, I whispered. Me neither, he murmured, smiling against my skin. But I'm glad we did. For the first time in years, the weight I'd been carrying wasn't just mine anymore. It was ours. And somehow that made it feel lighter. The kiss lingered between us even after it ended, like the air itself had changed. The tent no longer felt suffocating or small, it felt safe, sacred almost. I lay there with my forehead pressed against his, trying to memorize the warmth of his skin, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the quiet awe in his smile. So, Daniel said finally, breaking the silence with a crooked grin. That was unexpected. I laughed nervously, rubbing the back of my neck. Unexpected? Really? I've been staring at you like an idiot for years. He snorted. Yeah, and you think I didn't notice? Please. You're not as subtle as you think. Heat rushed to my cheeks. You could have said something. You could have too. He poked my side, grinning when I squirmed. But no, you had to sit there suffering in silence while I did the same. Typical us. Typical us, I echoed, shaking my head. But my smile wouldn't fade, not now, not with the way he was looking at me, like I was more than just his best friend, like I was something he'd been waiting for. The rain outside had softened into a drizzle, but inside, the storm had passed entirely. What was left was a fragile, glowing quiet. Daniel shifted closer, his shoulder brushing mine again. This time I didn't flinch. I leaned into it. Can I be honest? He asked, voice lower now, almost hesitant. Always. I was scared you'd pull away just now. That you'd regret it. His thumb brushed absently over the back of my hand, the small, tender motion grounding me. But you didn't. And I don't think I've ever been this relieved in my life. Something in my chest softened. I'm not going anywhere, Daniel. Not after this. Not ever if I can help it. His grin returned, brighter this time. Careful. That sounds dangerously close to a promise. Maybe it is. For a while we just sat there, tangled in the comfortable silence that used to feel so ordinary but now carried a new weight. Every brush of his knee against mine, every glance that lingered too long meant something more. Okay, but real talk, Daniel said, smirking. Do we tell people? Or do we keep this our little camping secret? I hesitated, the reality of it all creeping in. His family, our friends, the way everything would shift once this wasn't just ours anymore. I don't know, I admitted. It's not that I don't want people to know. I just want to hold on to this for a little while. Just us. Before the world gets involved. He nodded thoughtfully. Fair. Besides, watching you squirm while trying to keep a straight face around my parents sounds like fun. I shoved his shoulder, laughing. You're evil. And you like it. He shot me a wicked grin, but then it softened, his eyes meeting mine with startling sincerity. We'll figure it out. Whatever pace you need, I'm good with it. Just, don't make me wait years again, okay? I swallowed hard, touched by the way he made it sound so simple, so possible. Deal. We lay back down, this time without the awkward distance, without the pretense of space. His arm slipped naturally around me and I didn't fight it. I curled closer instead, tucking my head against his shoulder. It felt like slipping into something I'd been meant to wear all along. Comfortable? He murmured. More than comfortable. The drizzle faded, leaving only the damp hush of the forest outside. Inside the tent, his warmth anchored me, his steady heartbeat under my cheek promising something I never thought I'd have. Oh, the future. And for once, I didn't need to imagine what it might be like. I was living it. By the time the clouds broke fully, the woods smelled washed clean, damp earth and pine needles mixing into something almost sweet. We packed up slowly, neither of us in a rush to leave the tent that had become the place where everything changed. Daniel hummed under his breath as he rolled up the sleeping bag. The one we'd shared, the one I wasn't sure I'd ever look at the same way again. He glanced at me, caught me staring and grinned. What? Nothing, I said quickly, though the smile tugging at my mouth betrayed me. Liar. He slung the bag over his shoulder, stepping closer. You're thinking something embarrassing. Maybe I am. Care to share with the class? I shook my head, heat rushing to my cheeks. Not yet. He laughed, a sound so warm it made my chest ache. But then, softer, he reached out, brushing his fingers against mine. It wasn't much, Just a touch, light enough that no one else would have noticed. But I noticed, and I held on to it. We hiked back in companionable silence, the wet earth squelching under our boots, sunlight breaking through the trees in hesitant shafts. Every so often, our hands would brush again, and this time neither of us pulled away. By the time we reached the car, his fingers had threaded fully through mine. It felt natural. It felt inevitable. The drive home was filled with the same old banter. Him teasing me about my terrible sense of direction, me mocking his cooking skills, but beneath it ran something steadier. A current of certainty. Of belonging. When we pulled into his driveway, the Hale house looked exactly as it always had. The familiar porch light, the wind chimes clinking faintly, the smell of his mom's cooking wafting from the open kitchen window. Ordinary. But nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. Daniel killed the engine but didn't move to get out. He sat there, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel, glancing at me with that same half-smile he always wore when he was about to say something important. "So," he began, "this doesn't just stay in the woods, right?" Us. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. "No. Definitely not." "Good." His shoulders loosened, his grin spreading wider. "Because I don't think I can go back to pretending I don't want to hold your hand all the time." I laughed, shaky but genuine. "You're ridiculous." "And you like it?" he shot back, echoing the words he'd said in the tent. This time I didn't argue. I just squeezed his hand, grounding us both. "Yeah, I do." For a moment, we sat there in the quiet hum of the car, neither of us moving, just holding on. It wasn't dramatic or earth-shattering, but it didn't need to be. It was enough. Eventually, he leaned closer, pressing a quick, soft kiss to my temple before opening his door. "Come on. Let's not keep Dad waiting." I froze for a second at the mention of his dad, the man whose steady gaze had always unnerved me, who seemed to notice more than he let on. But then Daniel offered me his hand again, and I took it without hesitation. We walked toward the house together, fingers intertwined, steps in sync. It wasn't a grand declaration, not yet. But it was real. It was us. And as the kitchen door swung open, warm light spilling out to meet us, I realized something. The storm was over. But the real journey, our journey, was just beginning.